So welcome back to part 3 of this discussion on China-Pakistan economic corridors, my friends. I hope you are getting some value out of this discussion. Um, I, I need to apologize that for this distraction because unfortunately there is a constraint that a video cannot be uploaded for more than 30 minutes by YouTube. There are certain problems. But anyway, these these segments and different parts are basically for your own convenience. You can come back and listen to this talk at your own pace, at your own convenience, and try to get as much value out of it by learning new things and further explore your horizon to different regional and international aspects associated with CPEC. So in the last segment, we had discussed about the components of CPEC. I gave you what integrates into this BRI, or Belt and Road Initiative. Then we talked about what is basically geopolitics and geo-economics, and then how China is trying to influence the world by using its economic power. I call it dominance by debt because more and more countries are getting worried. Even Pakistan, there is a lot of discussion that this debt is being piled up on Pakistan, which has to be eventually paid back. So obviously, this debt or loans which China is using as an influence tool needs to be aware of, and then perhaps it's for our governments to make policy decisions to how to counter that. Anyway, let's come back to our CPEC discussion, and now let's see China's need for alternate trade routes. Why does China need it? So there are two underlining constraints which China has. One is the economic constraint, and the other is a geopolitical or geo-strategic factor. Let's examine the economic factor first. So, as I said, that being the most populated country of the world, with an enormous amount of human resources and technology available at its disposal, China slowly rose to become a regional and economic power in the world. So, as its trade grew and its factories started to work days and nights, so it resulted into three major economic constraints for China to be addressed. So one, that China needed to have enormous amount of crude oil to keep its factories and its industries running. The second constraint China needed was its need for raw material to create finished products. Finished products are also known as value-added products. So lastly, China needed to reach out to the consumer markets to sell whatever products it was manufacturing. So again, go back to your history lessons, ladies and gentlemen, and when you recall about the 17th, 18th centuries colonization by European powers like Britain, France, Denmark, Portugal. So what was their constraint? They had the similar constraints, which forced them to colonize African and Asian countries. With the 17th century industrial revolution, those countries needed a lot of raw material and cheap labor, as well as consumer markets for their factories and their products. So they began colonizing poor and weak countries in the African and Asian continents. At one stage, it was said that the sun never set on British Empire because somewhere around the world, the sun was always shining over a country which was a British colony. And that's why I had titled my research paper as CPEC, Pakistan's Chinanization or colonization. I know these are hard words, but again, we need to have answers to that. And unfortunately, the last government had been very hushed up about the details of CPEC. I have integrated the salient aspects of that paper in this presentation. So, as these three requirements for China grew, which I call as prime economic motives for China to build several trade routes under its Belt and Road Initiative. So, simultaneously, geopolitical and geostrategic factors were also pushing China to seek alternate trade routes. With the rise of China's power, United States and other smaller rising powers in the world like Japan, India and Australia, they saw that China's rising power, it threatens their hegemony in their respective regions of the world, what we call domains of influence. So they began, they cobbled together to challenge China's rise of its military and naval power by making alliances. So one alliance is called as Asian Security Diamond. It's also called as Quad. Quad stands for Quadrilateral Security Framework. Again, by US, Japan, India, and Australia. The purpose of this alliance is basically to check the rise of China's power, especially its naval power in the South China Sea as well as in the Indo-Pacific. So Indo-Pacific term refers to both Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean. Now China had foreseen that one day this Asian Security Diamond or Quad may stop China's sea trade route at the narrow Strait of Malacca in the Indian Ocean, through which its crude oil supply, which is a major crude supply oil supply route for China. So China's manufactured goods in return are also sold or reach consumer markets of different world through the same route. So if you see the atlas, you would find that the Strait of Malacca lies between Malaysia and Indonesia. It's a narrow channel of water, which in strategic terms is called choke point. So, which means that if this choke point is blocked, then all the passage of commercial sea liners comes to a halt. So it was natural for China to seek alternate trade routes. I think the reason behind making Karakoram Highway during the late 1970s in Gilgit-Baltistan area and Pakistan was these Chinese apprehensions that one day its maritime trade route through the Strait of Malacca would be blocked and it would be needing a land route over Pakistan to reach the Indian Ocean. So that's why China needed not only one trade route but alternate several other trade routes as well. So let's now discuss Gwador's deep sea port's significance. Pakistan has a shoreline at the Arabian Sea which extends to 1,046 kilometers. Pakistan has 6 seaports at its coastline: the Karachi port, Port Mohammed bin Qasim, Ormara port, Pasni port, Jiwani port, and the Gwador deep sea port. The Gwador deep sea port is the third largest deep sea port in the world and was built during 2002 and 2006. While the port was still under completion, its operational control was handed over to a Port of Singapore Authority from 2007 to 2012. However, Gwador's port operational control was later handed over to China's Overseas Port Holding Company in February 2013. Mind you, China's overseas port holding company is a China's state enterprise. So essentially, Gwador port was handed over to the Chinese government. So Pakistan handed over Gwador port to a 40 years lease at that time, which lavish tax concessions, tax holidays, lifetime waivers, custom duty exemptions on the import of machinery, guaranteed profits, sovereign state guarantees to keep paying their return on investments even in case of default. So technically speaking, Pakistan had already rented out or mortgaged its territory to China. And I will tell you later on, as we discuss the CPEC's master plan, Pakistan has also pledged to lease out thousands of acres of agricultural land also to China, which should be worrisome for us. Remember, this is what the international community is fearing about China's control over Pakistan through a new form of colonialism. But why did Pakistan hand over Gwador Deepsea port to China? There are several reasons for handing over the control, which include economic, geopolitical, and defense-related constraints. First of all, Pakistan had no capacity to develop a deep sea port. Money in these types of projects is pretty essential. Although Pakistan has no shortage of money, as you might be listening to the news these days, there are a lot of money has been laundered overseas, and even in Pakistan, a lot of money is available in Pakistan. Unfortunately, we could not have the appropriate land reforms in the country. And I always, during my talks and presentations here in Canada, I always say that, Pakistan's 70% problems would be solved the other day if we have meaningful and effective land reforms like Meiji Restoration in Japan, or in 1949, Indian Prime Minister Nehru had initiated land reforms in India. So land reforms are very essential for Pakistan. So Pakistan is considered to be a poor country which didn't have money to develop a deep sea port at its own. So since China had the necessary know-how and financial strength, China was the best available option. Secondly, Pakistan had full faith in China. Being a long-standing China's partner and a friend, China always helped Pakistan in geo-strategic and geopolitical affairs, being a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Third, China has always been helping out Pakistan in its national defense and security and defense-related affairs. But remember, a country's defense could only be ensured through strong economy. So considering the significance of Gwador for Pakistan's economy as well, I believe Pakistan had to rely on China to develop and operate and one day hand over the Gwador deep sea port to Pakistan. Pakistan had found a kind of a changed behavior in the United States. Remember, it's in international relations, international affairs. I will talk to you later about this thing. Henry Kissinger had presented this idea that there are no permanent friends. There are only national interests which bind the countries together. So after the end of the Afghan Jihad of the 1970s and 1980s, when the Soviet Union broke apart and Soviet forces withdrew, it is said that the United States didn't need Pakistan anymore. So Pakistan was put under a lot of economic sanctions for pursuing its nuclear program. So the US, which had been providing Pakistan with all kinds of military hardware in the past, so it stopped selling military armaments and weapons, including fighter jets, to Pakistan. So quite naturally, Pakistan had to look for alternate markets for its defense-related needs, as well as security guarantees from world powers. Since Pakistan's relations with Russia have always been historically cold, one due to Pakistan joined the U.S. club during the Cold War period since its birth. So Pakistan could not develop a strong relations with Soviet Union or Russia. Secondly, Pakistan has acted as a frontline state during the Afghan Jihad of 1980s. That's why Pakistan could not buy weapons or armaments from Soviet Union or Russia. And remember, India, despite being a member of non-aligned movement, which I referred earlier, had always maintained close ties with the former Soviet Union and now with Russia, and had been receiving arms and ammunition weapons from Russia. Secondly, India had very intelligently signed a treaty with the former Soviet Union. It was called the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation. It was signed in August 1971, after which, if you see, that India was successful in bifurcating Pakistan, in cutting its eastern Pakistan and making the creation and facilitating the creation of Bangladesh in 1971. And India also developed very deep strategic partnership, political and military relations with Russia as well. So unfortunately, Pakistan's relations with Russia remained frosty for nearly 67 years. So this frostiness in the relations started to break in 2014, when Pakistan signed a defense deal or a defense pact with Russia on 20th November 2014. And both countries started to have exchange of high-level visits from both sides. Russia also began to see a kind of a changed behavior in India. As you would know, or I will talk to you later as well about this issue, United States found new utility in India as its strategic partner to check the rise of China in this region. So obviously, with the closeness of US-India relations, Soviet Union started to look for an alternate relationship with Pakistan. So Russia also you must have recently read that after cutting down Pakistan's military aid, United States has recently cancelled its IMET, or International Military Education Training Program for the Pakistani military officers as well. So the same time Russia offered its services, so now the Pakistani military officers would be going to Russia for their advanced military training. So coming back to China and CPEC, what are the advantages of having a CPEC in Pakistan for China? There are several advantages and benefits which Gwador and CPEC bring to China. Mind you, Gwador's handover to China and CPEC is of less importance or less significance to Pakistan and carries huge stakes for China. It's highly beneficial, and for that I always say that China will go to extreme lengths to make it successful. Now with Gwador handover to China and the construction of CPEC corridor, China has gained several advantages. First of all, with CPEC getting operational and Gwador coming under China's state control, China has become essentially a two-ocean country. Previously, it had only access to the Pacific Ocean. Now it has essentially an access to the Indian Ocean as well. So, although denied by both China and Pakistan, United States and other international players, they have alleged, they believe that Gwador Deepsea port will one day become China's naval base in the Indian Ocean. We'll talk about it at length when we reach that segment. Number two advantage for China is that through CPEC, China's trade route has been secured. Now, even if the Strait of Malacca is blocked by that Asian Security Diamond or the Quad, China's oil and the passage of crude oil, as well as its transportation of finished products, can be ensured. Third, China has shortened its maritime trade route, which used to pass through the Indian Ocean, then to the South China Sea, and to Shanghai. It has been shortened. There are no exact figures, but some say it is 5,000 miles, or some say 10,000 kilometers. So it's something, but a great deal of shortage in the route. So what happens? The previous route was long, time-consuming, and expensive. With this construction of 2,395 kilometer long CPEC, which connects Gwador with China's Kashgar. So China has not only shortened or secured its route, but it has also made it economically viable, saving precious money and resources. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of part 3. I know these are short segments, but the next part is pretty long. It talks about an undeclared war for naval dominance in the Indian Ocean. It is not directly related to CPEC, but I'm sure for your better understanding, you should know where this region is going, and with China coming into a major player in the Indian Ocean, there is a rush for having naval ports in the Indian Ocean. We'll talk about it in the next segment. So stay tuned. This is Adnan Qaiser, ending the section 3 or part 3 of discussion on CPEC. Thank you very much for listening.